Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. So this is video part 2 of a 3-part series, how to get your research clinic off the ground, which I will also convert into a 3-part series blog post on the Collaborista blog, which is owned and managed by the sponsor of my show, Intralinks. So check it out, okay? Just go to my website, theclinicaltrialsguru.com, go to Powered by Intralinks tab, and then it'll have all the links to all of the Intralinks products, including their blog, which is the Collaborista blog, where I feature some content on there, okay, written content. So in the last video, part 1, we talked about how to get your site off the ground. So this one, part 2, I'm going to focus on how pharma, what the industry in general can do to make clinical research both more worthwhile for a new site to get started and more worthwhile for a new principal investigator to get started in research, and also how they can continue doing research once they start. So I concluded that last video by going off of a stat, and I didn't have the exact number. I think it's a dynamic number that changes a lot, but it's a high number. I should say most PIs who have never done a study and then do a clinical trial never do another clinical trial. And that's a big problem for the industry because it ties into patient recruitment, and it ties into the fact that a lot of studies are running behind schedule and not enrolling on time, and therefore the big picture is better treatments are not getting to market faster because clinical trials are costlier, slower, not as efficient as they could be. And I think a part of the problem is that you're not getting the physicians to have the qualified study participants as patients of their own private practice should be the ones who are also doing the clinical trials. And that's almost flipped in the sense that the physicians who have the patients that match a study usually don't do studies, and the physicians that do studies, and of course there's exceptions everywhere, the physicians that do studies, they don't have the busy private practice. There are those that do both, and those are the ones that do really well for themselves. But what can pharma do to make it easier for sites? Well, they started doing this back in 2012. CROs actually started doing this. It was the preferred site model, which unofficially probably has not lost much traction, but officially they don't really throw around those terms anymore. So I know Quintiles was doing a lot of preferred site for their studies, and the CROs did it more for themselves. The CROs did it so that they can market themselves better to the sponsors and say, hey, you know, we have these preferred sites who we've trained. We know for a fact that they're physicians, that they're PIs, have the patient population to enroll quickly and on time, so therefore choose us to be the CRO for your study, and you'll have a more efficient trial. That's, in a nutshell, the idea and the reasoning and the logic behind the preferred site model. And I think sponsors can go even further than that. So what sponsors can do, and they're doing a pretty good job with the Transcelerate movement, which I'm going to be talking to the CEO of drugdev.org, which is one of the investigator portals where investigators can go sign up to be notified of studies that they can participate in. So they're trying to match the physicians who are interested in research with the studies that are out in the marketplace and trying to match the two together to create, again, more efficient trials. Sponsors can go even a step further by creating studies like phase 4 studies and then approaching physicians who are interested in doing clinical research, or at least who have expressed interest in doing clinical research, by allowing them to participate in these sort of easier studies like phase 4 studies and quality of life studies and satisfaction survey studies. Phase 4 studies are studies on drugs that have already been approved by the FDA, but they still need to collect more data on. So those typically are not very lucrative when it comes to how much they reimburse the sites and the investigator for, but they are good because they build up that investigator's experience so that they can then start applying for those phase 3 and those phase 2 studies, which are more lucrative. Another thing pharma can do a better job of is they have sales reps, and they already do a really good job on the sales end when they're going out to mostly research naive physician private practices. They're sending their reps out, they're making sure that those doctors are prescribing their drug because it's a business and that's what sales reps are supposed to do. But they don't talk about research at all unless the physician expresses interest, which I think they could be a bit more proactive on that front. And so most pharmas have a position called a medical liaison. And what this person does, this person is the intermediary between the sales end of the pharma team and the research and development side of the pharma team. And in my video, How to Get More Studies for Your Clinical Research Company, I tell sites all the time that are trying to get into research and trying to get more studies, find out who your medical liaison is for every rep, every company that comes into your office, and get a hold of that person, because they're going to be able to introduce you to and give you feasibility surveys for studies that are appropriate for your practice. So I think right now they're kind of taking a more passive approach, and they're not presenting this as an opportunity to physicians. And again, a lot of physicians, like I said in my last video, they don't really understand that clinical research is something that's done in private industry. They think that this is something done in academic institutions, universities, nonprofit organizations. They have no clue that a lot of their colleagues are doing clinical research right out of their office, right out of their private practice, and are on the cutting edge of new technologies and new medications that have not yet hit the market, and are also making pretty good money doing that and actually building separate businesses doing this. So I tell the sites to approach the medical liaisons, and I think if pharma wanted to make it easier for qualified physicians with the right patient population and demographics to start conducting clinical trials, they need to be more proactive about having the medical liaison discuss clinical research as an option for the private practice. Plus, what a lot of pharma needs to understand, and they probably do, is the fact that a physician who does a clinical trial on a drug and that drug gets approved is very likely to start prescribing that drug too, so they can kind of complete the entire pipeline for that drug and for that doctor, who will then prescribe that drug to his patients in the real world. So that's another thing pharma can do, and one thing that I think the entire industry needs to push for is for the Sunshine Act. So I know a lot of physicians that I've talked to who do clinical research, and they have a separate company set up for clinical research. As you know, there's a lot of expenses that are associated with running a clinical research site. So profit margins might be 50%, but they might be 20, 30. Sometimes you're just breaking even, especially when you're just starting out. For the first 18 months to maybe 2 full years, the site's not necessarily profitable, you're just breaking even. Well, what the Sunshine Act does, it makes public all monies being paid by pharma companies to physicians, which is good because we do need some kind of disclosure when it comes to marketing and what they do on the sales side, because you want to make sure that your doctor's not necessarily influenced by a certain drug company. I get that. I'm sure most people understand that. Where they go too far is that they include clinical research revenue, gross revenue, to the actual clinic. They include that as income under the Sunshine Act to that principal investigator. Even if that principal investigator is not even an owner of the research clinic, just a PI and an employee, or just a PI and an independent contractor, it shows the gross revenue that site earned under that PI shows as payments to the PI. So it inflates the numbers under the Sunshine Act, which are public records for anyone to see. So it makes it seem like the doctor is receiving a lot more money and payment from the drug companies than they actually are. So those are the things I would do if I were pharma or CRO, trying to make it easier for qualified physicians to do trials and make it more worthwhile for physicians to continue doing research once they did their first study. This is Dan from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Let me know your thoughts, right? 949-415-6256. Call or text me anytime. Also, you can email me, Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.